Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee and do powerfully command thee, O Spirit. Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee and do powerfully command.
In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Abercast. I'm sorry, I'm ticking around my tarot cards. Welcome to the Abercast. I'm your host, John Towers. Tonight we're going to be continuing our sort of discussion about the state, I guess, of Western civilization. I believe that we are in the beginning of the end. As you know, one time the West was, the shining city on the hill, as Reagan would put it. As Jim Morrison would put it, the West is the best. The West is the best. Just get here, and we'll do the rest. So we've had, I think, 3 episodes talking about the conception, the birth, the origins of Western civilization. And it wasn't like a beat for beat throughout history sort of thing, but I feel like that we did some good work in those episodes. So tonight we're shifting gears just a little bit, and we're going to be talking about the death of Western civilization, the predictions of Spengler. There's a guy out there in like 1918. Some German out there in 1918 wrote a book. We're going to get into it a little bit. The guy's name is Oswald Spengler. And I got a couple articles here. We're going to be talking about some of his work and one of his theories in particular. But before I get started into that, as we're going through this and we're talking specifically about his civilization model, the spring, summer, fall, winter model. I want, we spent an awful long time talking about the book of Genesis, and when we're going through these things, we're talking about these phases. That's the first thing I thought of was the Tower of Babel, right? So it came, I guess it's actually cyclical. It starts in a farm, in this egalitarian sort of environment, like a Garden of Eden, and then it moves forward into like a town, which I guess in my particular idiom would be Cain built a town after he killed Abel. So Cain had a son named Enoch, not the Enoch that became the Metatron. It was a different Enoch. So he named his son Enoch, and then he also had built this town called Enoch. And then right after that is when sort of all hell broke loose with these angels fucking these earth chicks, because we all know it's all about the earth chicks. And then the flood came, and then after the flood, humans sort of build back better. All the human infrastructure, the build back better. And they became a one world government, the Tower of Babel, and they were reaching to the heavens to shoot bows and arrows into the sky and all that stuff. And then what happened? They got humbled. God humbled them, caused their endeavor to be destroyed and spread out back to smaller towns and so forth. The fall of the fall of the one world Tower of Babel tyranny. So that's just something I was thinking about as I was going through and collecting these things and doing the research. But that also continues. Like, we're working our way through Exodus, and what happens, Joseph and all those guys come from their father's sort of compound, and they get wrapped up in the city, like the city-state of Egypt, the kingdom of Egypt. And, what they're building gigantic pyramids and all this shit. And what happens there? 10 plagues, son. Here you go. They get humbled. So it's just something to think about. Where am I at? I got to collect my shit here. I have with me my vessel of the art. Handy dandy. Sanctified vessel of the art. Here with that carries within it the formula for the weapon of mass distraction, my Jinn Jihad. So here, let me get this party started. All right. Oswald Spengler. So before we get into the main part of this, we have to work a little bit to kind of clear out a definition. When we get into Spengler's work, he talks about Western civilization as a Faustian civilization. And to me, of course, I'm like, okay, well, we're making a pact with the, Mephistopheles and this sort of thing. So I actually had to do a little bit of work to get my handle on a better explanation of it. I mean, obviously, it's about Faust and Mephistopheles, but it works. He's got a more intellectual sort of feel to it, instead of just coming out saying that Western civilization made a pact with the devil, and that's all there is to it. It's about expansion and infinity and potential. So I wanted to set the board here with this. Oswald Spengler and the Faustian Soul of the West, Part 1. We're going to skip around through this. This is by a guy named Ricardo Duchesne. Duchesne. It's not Duquesne. Duchesne. So, I'm sorry I did not butcher your name on purpose, sir. If I had to choose one word to identify the uniqueness of the West, it would be Faustian. This is the word Oswald Spengler used to designate the soul of the West. He believed that Western civilization was driven by an unusual dynamic and expansive psyche. The prime symbol of this Faustian soul was pure and limitless space. This soul had a tendency towards the infinite, a tendency most accurately expressed in modern mathematics. The infinite continuum the exponential logarithm and its dissociation from all connection with magnitude, a transference to a transcendent relational world were some of the words Spengler used to describe Western mathematics. But he also wrote of the bodiless music of the Western composer, in which harmony and polyphony bring him to images of utter beyondness, all transcend all possibilities of visual definition. And before the modern era, the Gothic form feeling of pure, imperceptible, unlimited space. The soul type was first visible, according to Spengler, in medieval Europe, starting with Romanesque art, but particularly with the spaciousness of the Gothic cathedral. The heroes of the Grail and Arthurian legends and Siegfried's sagas, ever roaming in the infinite, and the Crusades, including the Hohenstaufen in Sicily and Hansa in the Baltic, and the Teutonic Knights in the Slavic East, and later the Spaniards in America, and the Portuguese in the East Indies. Spengler thus views the West as strikingly vibrant culture driven by a type of personality overflowing with expansive impulses, intellectual will to power, fighting, progressing, overcoming of resistance, battling against what is near tangible and easy. These are some of the terms Spengler used to describe this soul. Variety of words have been used to describe or identify the particular history of the West: individualist, rationalist, imperialist, secularist, restless, and racist. Spengler's term Faustian, it seems to me, best captures the persistent and far greater originality of the West since ancient times, and all the intellectual, artistic, and heroic spheres of life. I'm going to skip ahead here to get to the point of this Faustian personality. I believe that Oswald Spengler's identification of the West as Faustian provides us with the best word to overcome the current naive separation between cultured, peaceable West and an uncivilized, antagonistic West. The image of a strikingly vibrant culture driven by a type of Faustian personality overflowing with expansive, disruptive, imaginative impulses manifested in all spheres of life. For Spengler, the Faustian spirit was not restricted to the arts and sciences, but present in the culture of the West at large. Spengler thus spoke of the morphological relationship that inwardly binds us together, the expression of forms of all branches of culture: Rococo art, differential calculus, the Crusades, the Spanish conquest of the Americas, were all an expression of the same restless soul. There was no incongruity between the great ideas of the West and the so-called realities of conquest and suffering. There is no need to form this standpoint to concede to multicultural critics, as Norman Davies believes, the sorry catalog of wars, conflict, and persecutions that have dogged every stage of the Western tale. The expansionist dispositions of Europeans were not only indispensable, but were themselves driven, as this guy, Ricardo, argues in his book, The Uniqueness of Western Civilization, and will briefly outline below, by an intensive felt desire to achieve great deeds and heroic immortality. The great men of Europe were artists driven by intensive felt desire for unmatched deeds. The great ideas, Archimedes. Give me a place to stand, and with a lever I will move the whole world, or Hume's love of literary fame, my ruling passion, were associated with the aristocratic traits, defiant depositions, no less than Cortez's immense ambition for honor and glory. To die worthily than to live dishonored. So, put a little bit of flavor on what we're going to get into here. It's not necessarily an easy topic all the way around. This idea of racism will pop up here and there, and I imagine this is one of the reasons that Spengler had cast Faust as a model of his conceptualization of the West. Now, granted, he was German. The guy was German, so it's like he is standing in the middle of this idea that he's talking about. He is not an outside critic of Western civilization. So let's get to the big one. This is the meat and potatoes of this episode. We're only 16 minutes in. We're going to be just fine. How a German historian predicted the decline of Western civilization 100 years ago. This is from a person named RELAMPAGO FURIOSO. It was written February 11th, 2016 on a blog that I found, or a website, I should say, that I found called thereturnofkings.com. Thereturnofkings.com, I gotta say, is a little bit of, I don't want to say misogyny. They call it the manosphere or the manoverse or something like that. It's really geared towards, I guess people would look at it today and say toxic masculinity or whatever, but I skirted around some of this stuff. You know, this is the last thing we need to be inviting some critique of the Abercast as like some kind of incel organization or or one of these men's rights groups or whatever. Look, I'm just talking about these articles, bro. That's all. So, with that being said, there's a lot of discussion. This is the article back in 2016 even. It's funny because, I don't know. I'll let you guys judge it. Here, hold on. I gotta visit the land of milk and honey. There's a lot of discussion these days about America, and the other nations compromising Western civilization being in decline. And there is certainly a lot of evidence to support this claim, whether it be dying populations among the Caucasian races that created this civilization, unchecked immigration rapidly replacing native populations in Europe and the United States, evidence that America is currently and has been behaving as an imperialistic empire, but now slowly losing its power around the world. A culture that seems completely to disregard the importance of family and the building blocks of civilization. Loss of religiousness and a sense of purpose signs that something is wrong are everywhere. You may be surprised to learn that many of the things that have been happening to the Western civilization were written down in a predictive model of history written by a German historian and philosopher, Oswald Spengler, nearly 100 years ago. I'm skipping down into the seasonal model thing. That's the interesting part. Spengler equated the 4 cycles in human civilizations to the seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Winter is coming. In compiling his work, he studied the 8 high cultures thought to have existed: Babylon, Egyptian, Indian, Chinese, Mayan / Aztec, Greek / Roman or classical, Arab, and finally Faustian, or what we call Western civilization. He believed each of these 8 civilizations went through phases, just like the seasons. While some of those cultures are still with us, they have not been dominant cultural forces since their winters. For example, China was referred to as the sleeping giant until it picked up on some of the vitality of the West. This was just 2016, bro. In Spengler's model, each culture goes through a formative culture stage, or followed by a decadent period known as civilization. The culture period makes up the organic spring and summer of a civilization, and is when the civilization is inspired by its own art and religion. Autumn and winter make up the civilization phase, in which the society becomes inorganic and is only based in the organization created during the cultural phase. The creativity seen in the culture period slowly fades away. The civilization stiffens and becomes overpopulated, metropolitan, and uninspired. For the purpose of this article, we will focus mainly on Western civilization and its expression of the 4 seasons. Roughly speaking, each season makes up about 250 years. The procession of seasons happened to all civilizations Spengler studied. Spengler said that by using his civilization model, he can make up predictions so accurate that they would astonish people. Indeed, since 1918 through the present day, his predictions for the Faustian civilization has been spot on. The culture phase, spring and summer. Spengler wrote, Western civilization entered its pre-culture stage before 1000 AD. Anno Dominus. During this time, there is what he calls the chaos of primitive expression forms, mystical symbolism, and naive imitation. As with other civilizations coming into being, the Faustian civilization, there is a lot of apocalyptic imagery in this period, and a fascination with death. Architecturally, the Romanesque cathedrals constructed around this time mark the beginning of the new Faustian culture form. In literature, collective epics like Beowulf and works such as The Song of Roland are published. Politically, there are tribes and their chiefs, and yet no politics and no state. If you're interested in the Song of Roland, we went through a Song of Roland phase here on the Advertise. There's quite a few Song of Roland episodes. I remember them being really fun. It was quite some time ago, but I really remember having a good time reading, medieval French poetry. You can find it on the featured topic link, abercast.com. Moving into spring, there is also, just reading that part, reading the thing about the cathedrals and stuff. And, I've been to the cathedral in DC, and I've been to Notre Dame. Hold on. Names are falling out of my pockets here. I've been to castles in Europe, and these giant cathedrals and stuff, and I get the sense that we couldn't do that. We can't do that today. We couldn't we couldn't just mark out a plot of land and build a cathedral today. I don't even know if we could do it with our modern bullshit, let alone the shit that they had back then. So this part of it reminds me, and thinking about that reminds me of Tolkien. I don't bring up Tolkien a lot on the show. Every once in a while, I guess, maybe more than I think I do. Anyhow, there's this beautiful passage about the past technologies, and Gimli is talking about the halls of Moria or something, and he was like, he was looking around, and he was like, our people and all of our even more advanced technology couldn't do this. And that shows through, if all you know about Tolkien or the movies, that shows through, like, every location in the movies has, like, this undercurrent of, like, an art history lesson to it. Like, there's always, like, ruins of something cool that no one ever even talks about. No one explains it, nothing. It's just there. It's something in the background, and it's awesome, or it's gigantic. And, there's this, I believe Tolkien also had this idea, he was writing in or around this, he was a veteran of the Somme, World War I. So he probably knew of Oswald Spengler's writing. Spengler probably knew of Tolkien's writing, and this idea that there's this art history that's kind of stapled around in decay, that we couldn't duplicate. And this is one of the reasons I don't like Ancient Aliens, is because I'm like, you're totally discounting how fucking awesome human beings are and how, like, crazy they are when they put their mind to stuff. But, I don't know. Okay, so moving into spring, there's a powerful cultural creation from awakening souls, unity, and culture abundance. Great creations of the newly awakened dream-heavy soul, the super-personal unity and fullness. Some of Faustian Civilization's expression of this idea were as follows: the Holy Grail romances such as Percival. The story of the Grail are written. Architectural style shifts from Romanesque to Gothic cathedrals. Gregorian chants evolve as musical form, and we hear polyphony becoming the great Western musical form. While we are discussing polyphony, it is important to note that Spengler considered infinity to be the central motivating idea behind Faustian/Western civilization. It is expressed in its music as polyphony. It's mathematics as infinitesimal calculus, and finally through manifest destiny/boundless exploration conducted by Western civilization, which ultimately led to the ultimate infinity, which was space. Mars, bitches. Red rocks. Yay, yay. So here's another thing. Not to bang too much on modern pop culture, but, he's talking about the Gregorian chants as, like, the, soundtrack for this Faustian civilization. So in one ear, listen to the Gregorian chants, and on the next ear, listen to, like, Wet Ass Pussy by Nicki Minaj. And, like, well, it seems to me that there might be some degradation here. Look at the artwork, from the Renaissance, to Jackson Pollock. There seems to be some degradation here. That's explainable. You can check out the feature topic link again at abercast.com and find out what the fuck happened to postmodern art. But, it's not saying that it's all internal or it's all external. It just happens, right? There's some sort of degradation that happens. Politically, there is a formation of national groups, groups of definite style, in particular world-feeling nations, working of an eminent state idea. This is subdivided into two prime classes: the noble and the priest. Feudal economics, purely egalitarian values, transitioning into actualizing of the matured state idea. Town versus countryside. Rise of the third estate or the bourgeoisie. Victor Victory of money over landed property. Moving into summer, we see these developments in culture, ripening consciousness, earliest urban and critical stirrings in Faustian Civilization. The dominant literature shifts from Grail romances to novels such as Don Quixote and Shakespearean plays. Architectural forms once again shift from Gothic cathedrals to princely palaces, and polyphonic musical forms evolve into Baroque. This is interesting, which is the period of the birth of the classical musician. The politics we see conflicts between aristocracy and monarchy. The political center shifts from castles and estates to the cities. So here what we see the shift from a group of people to a smaller group of people or a person. The polyphonic musical forms evolve into Baroque. The performer, the dude, who does the music, the maestro. We see it going from the dukes and the duchesses and the counts and the countesses to the monarchy. The political center shifts from castles and estates into cities, capitals. The political epochs in spring and summer. Feudalism, the spirit of countryside and countrymen. The city-only markets or stronghold. Chivalric religious ideas, strugglings of vassals among them against their overlords. This is like 900 to 1500 AD. Crisis and dissolution of patriarchal forms from feudalism to aristocracy. 900 to 15 AD. Fashioning a world of states and strict forms, 15 to 1800 AD. Climax of the state form, absolutism. Unity of town and country, state and society, 15 to 18 AD. Breaking up of the state forms. This is revolution. Napoleonism. Victory of the city over the countryside, of the people over the privileged. The intelligentsia over tradition, of money over poverty, or over policy, rather, 1800 to 2000 AD. So now we're moving into the civilization phase. We're moving out of the cultural phase into the civilization phase, which is autumn and winter. The body of the people, now essentially urban in constitution, dissolves into a formless mass, a megalopolis, and provinces, the fourth estate masses, inorganic, cosmopolitan. We have now entered the civilization phase as summer transitions into autumn. The intellect of the civilization, fully developed, begins to sterilize away the culture's early organic nature. Spengler calls it the intelligence of the city, peak of strict intellectual creativeness. In the West, the Enlightenment occurs during this time. Classical music peaks and then declines as an art form, further making the shift into the civilization phase. The civilization becomes metropolitan, first overpopulating its cities, only to eventually begin dying out once winter arrives. In autumn, true art dies out in favor of metropolitan art for the masses. Here I'm reading this with disdain, but it's comic books, bro. That's what they're saying. Politically, there are struggles between the aristocracy and the bourgeoisie, revolutions, Napoleonism. The American Revolution occurs during autumn. Also in autumn, we see urban rise, peak of disciplined organizational strength. This is the peak of the civilization, which is then followed by a fissure in the world urban civilization, exhaustion of mental organization, strength, and irreligiousness rising. Boy, tell me about it. According to Spengler, Western world has entered winter and its civilization is ending. He describes winter as a dawn of megalopolitan civilization, extinction of the spiritual creative force. Life itself has become problematical. Ethical, practical tendencies of irreligious and unmetaphysical cosmopolitanism. Over the coming decades, Spengler expected the intellect of our... This should be in bold or italics or something. Over the coming decades, Spengler expects the intellect of our civilization to fade. People to stop reading and thinking as the civilization as a whole loses interest in thought. And the government to become autocratic, tyrannical. Art will further devolve into meaningless subjects of fashion, the population compromising. The civilization will continue dying off as it loses touch with the myths and the culture it was founded upon. We are also expecting the spread of the final world sentiment of our civilization as the spread of socialism around the world. As government becomes autocratic, we can expect primitive human conditions slowly thrust up into the highly civilized mode of living. Our great works and most of our technology will fade and lie in ruins as the population compromising our civilization fades away. First the countryside and then the cities will depopulate, as seen in the Rust Belt now in cities like Detroit. Spengler says that we should also expect conquest of our now exhausted civilization by young people eager for spoils or foreign conquerors, as an imperial machinery of the state falls apart. Keep in mind, this was all predicted in 1918 by Spengler, even though it sounds as if it were written today. Boy, howdy, does it. Political epochs in the autumn and winter. The domination of money. Economic powers permeating the political forms and authorities. This is 1800 to 2000 A.D. Annidominus. Victory of force politics over money. Increasing primitiveness of political forms. Whoa. Inward decline of the nations into a formless population and constitution thereof as an imperium of gradually increasing crudity of despotism. This should be 2000 to 2200 AD. Private and family policies of individual leaders, the world as spoils, Egypticism, Mandarism, Byzantinism, historyless stifling and enfeeblement even of the imperial machinery against the young peoples eager for spoil or alien conquerors. Primitive human conditions slowly thrust up into the highly civilized mode of living after 2200 AD. I mean, it feels to me like it's ahead of schedule. The future, echoing Roman civilization. In the winter of Roman politics, there was a shift from the Roman Republic to Caesarianism, or government led by a charismatic strongman. Eventually, the idea of representation broke down, and there was a shift to bloody force politics. Of course, our current government is modeled on the Roman system. There are even similarities between the two dominant parties in Rome. The two dominant parties were those of the Optimates and the Populares, the Republicans and Democrats of their day. This form of representative government eventually stops working because the system of checks and balances interfere with each other, causing gridlock. Force politics, which is a nice way of saying killing bitches, killing motherfuckers, eventually comes along to break the gridlock. And aside, some historians say it's possible we entered this era in 1963 with the assassination of JFK by the military-industrial complex. I guess some people might say that. Arguably, Oliver Stone, your office is calling. Arguably, this predictive model is spot on with the current situation in the Western world. So if Spengler's model is correct, we are awaiting the rise of a dictator to come along and smash the rotten edifice of democracy sometime in this century. Spengler on democracy. Spengler did not have a very high opinion on democracy. Well, first of all, before we get into this, we're not a democracy. I'm speaking about America officially. They just were talking about it being a representative republic. Anyhow, he didn't have a high opinion of democracy. You know who else didn't have a very high opinion of democracy? The Founding Fathers. That's why we have a republic. He believed it was the form of government of a civilization in decline, and interestingly, the idea of mass democracy arrived in the winter of Faustian Western civilization. Spengler viewed democracy as a weapon of moneyed interests who use the media to create the illusion that there is consent from the governed. To him, the notion of democracy is really no different than living under a plutocracy government by the wealthy or the elite, using the media as propaganda. Money is turned into force and controls people's lives. The leftist cause that has dominated the last century, such as equalism, feminism, and socialism, to Spengler were only tools to assist the moneyed to power to be more effective. Wow, when you look into this great reset business, how true is all that? All this time we thought it was going to be socialism creeping up. We thought it was going to be communism creeping up. Nope, it's just rich and greedy globalists. After all of this, they really were the useful idiots after all. And the hippie generation, and all the Bill Clinton people. Anyhow, maybe more on that next episode. It depends on how spicy I feel like getting. The decline is also marked by increasing authoritarian leaders as the democracy breaks down. Monetary powers permeate the government, eventually destroying it. This is where we currently are on Spengler's timeline, which leads to what Spengler expects will happen in the West. The rise of a Caesar as democracy dominated by money crumbles under its own corruption. People will cease to participate in elections. The best candidates will remove themselves from politics. Spengler thinks blood is the only force that can conquer the force of money. A new springtime after the winter. Spengler's predictions of decline, as persistent as they have been over the last century, may leave you feeling a sense of hopelessness after studying his work. However, as one culture and civilization fades away, it is very likely that another will arise of this organic cycle. Not after the reset, the great reset, reset. John David Gibbsler Gibsner later studied Spengler's work and believes a new consciousness will emerge from the ashes of the old civilization. Just as Western civilization was built upon the ashes of ancient Greece and Rome, a new civilization may well be built on the ashes of our own. The Decline of the West, published in 1918 and largely unknown today, is a work that very well could be among the greatest ideas ever conceived by the human mind. It smashes the linear model of history, always moving upwards, presented in a public school system, and instead presents the idea that throughout history, man and his civilizations go through periods of birth, growth, decline, and death. So I like this idea, this cyclical idea. I mean, I don't like the idea that the Western civilization is coming to a crashing, exploding, fucking horrific end as fast as it seems like it's coming around. But I like the idea of this cyclical thing. This is like a Nietzschean time loop sort of idea. And it leaves stuff for us to unpack, right? So there's this idea of the four archetypical generations that I've tried to do a show on in the past. I can't really pull it together for some reason. But it sort of is encapsulated by the idiom. It's like, strong men create easy times, and easy times creates weak men. It's this sort of boomerang, this sort of slinky down the steps of culture. This slinky zipping down the steps of civilization. Eventually it's going to hit the end, I guess, but there's reason and rhyme in, to it. It also brings to mind the idea is if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. So I guess that's what the Abercast is nowadays, is we're talking about the decline, the failure and decline and destruction of Western civilization. I'm here for the long haul, guys. I'm here for the ride. Me and my trusty vessel of the art and Abercast.com and everything. We're going to be looking at it. Buckle your seatbelt, I guess. Because here we go. The slinky, behold, the slinky turneth. No, slinkies don't, they could turn, but in the analogy of him walking down the stairs. Oh, behold, the slinky steppeth. This has been the Abercast, and I'm John Towers. I'll let Hilda tell you the rest.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please send an email or find us on social media and let us know what you think about the show. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star rate and review wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find Stigmata Studios, graphic, novels, and comic books. Take control of your destiny. Understand your past. Put your present in context and know your future with a twist. Check out the Abercast Tarot card deck. Your body is your temple. So let's make sure you got a badass t-shirt on it. Variety of cool occult themed t-shirts. And other merch like stickers, wall art, mugs, and more. Welcome to the Red Archive. Get access to over 50 hours of archived episodes. More bonus audio. Additional exclusive content. All this for only $1 a month. Are you interested in the occult, history, conspiracy, and violence? Learn more at abracast.com.